Am I looking into your eyes?
Yeah, yeah, it's good. It's very romantic then.
Well, you got a romantic sounding voice, so I thought I might.
All right, let's kick into it. The most successful people in the world all have one thing in common. They've learned how to think big by developing a perspective of possibility. And the good news is, we all have the potential to apply the same strategies to achieve amazing things in our work and lives. Hi, I'm Rob Hartnett, and as your Chief Possibility Officer and host, I'm here to inspire you to become the star of your world as a person of possibility, through learning how people from all areas of life are thinking big and chasing down their dreams. I'm super excited this episode because we've got an overseas guest. We've got the wonderful Dan Pfister, all the way from Canada. And Dan is the author of the new book, $1 Million WinBack, which I am so excited about that Dan's finally got this great book out. So $1 Million WinBack. Dan Pfister, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Rob. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's so good. You've now got this great book out. I believe it's just out now, isn't it? Is it just,
Yep,
can you get it from
just
Amazon?
out.
It's
Yeah, you can get it from Amazon now. It's up there all ready to go.
Fantastic. We'll talk about that a bit later on, though. Dan, we talked a few years ago about the concept of WinBack, which I love and I practiced, and you know that, and I really like it as a sales strategy. But why the book and why now?
Well, why the book? WinBack is this tremendous revenue strategy, and it really isn't talked about much. And over the years, I've learned so much. I've done WinBack for 8 years now. I've done a couple of $1 million WinBacks, won back thousands of lost customers, learned a lot of lessons. And so that's what I've learned like on my own. And then I did this WinBack study, and I talked to over 170 revenue leaders or interacted with them. I didn't talk to every one of them. And I learned so much more about WinBack, about, what works, what doesn't. And I learned all these commonalities of what's working, and also got a ton of metrics. We can talk about some of the metrics about WinBack. And the other thing is I did a WinBack podcast and talked to fantastic people like you, who so generously shared their WinBack strategies. So I learned all this stuff over these last years from all these revenue leaders and my own experience. And I thought, why don't I put this into a book? Why don't I kind of put out everything that I've learned? So I spent way too long writing this book. And so that's the reason why, because there is this tremendous strategy that not many people talk about. And, there's, and like, why, like why now? And, you know, you, if you go into Amazon and you take a look at how many sales books they've got, there's over 60,000 sales and marketing books.
Wow.
And if you Google customer win back, you'll only find two books dedicated to win back.
Wow, it's
And
incredible.
it's nuts. And the other book, it's called Customer Win Back. It's written by Jill Griffin and Michael Lowenstein. It's a brilliant book. Original research. They did all their own study, and but it's 20 years old and it's still relevant today. Don't get me wrong; it's not relevant. It's a brilliant book, but times have changed in some ways, and this book is just one more piece. Uh, one more thing that will help you structure your own win back program.
And I think that it's a really good point. It really gives me the answer in terms of why you wrote it, and I'm so glad you wrote it. And the why now I think is important. But or we might just define win back. And so when we're talking about win back, we're talking about when you've lost a really significant customer, but you didn't really want to lose them, like you lost them for whatever
Yeah,
reason, and you really want them back because there are some customers you lose you don't want back. It's true, isn't it? There's some you just like
it's very
you're
true.
really happy
Yeah.
they've gone, but this is about the customers that you might have had might have had the whole of business, you might have had some of the business, but they've gone somewhere for some reason. But now you want them back, and that's what we're talking about here. This is what a win-back strategy is. It's really about saying to yourself and your team, we really want them. We miss that customer. It was a great customer, and this is the reason I like the win-back strategy. Talk to me about the win-back strategies. To me, is always about growth mindset, and realizing that as an organization, sometimes we're not perfect. Sometimes we will make mistakes, and customers will
Mhm.
leave. But I think the win-back strategy, you need to have a growth mindset. And I just want to get your thoughts on that about saying, hey, we might have stuffed up. They've left for a particular reason, but we make mistakes. Doesn't mean we can't win them back again. Doesn't mean we can't learn from our mistakes and win them back again. Would you say that after talking through the leaders you spoke to, that most of those leaders who are doing win back well have a growth mindset?
They definitely did. They definitely did. It's I think of it almost as a possibility mindset. That's what you've got, right, Rob? You've
Yeah.
got this thing, everything's possible. Like, let's just take a shot at it. Let's give it a real shot and let's see if it'll work. And that's what I found. Like, the thing that holds so many people back from WinBack is that they're afraid to connect with their past customers because it's a fear thing. They're afraid that they
Right.
left you because you did something wrong or because of your product. And nothing could be further from the truth. People leave for all kinds of reasons. They could have been lured away by a competitor, and they might have found that competitor doesn't do as good a job as you. So they might be more than ready to come back. New leadership could have come in. They could have brought their preferred vendor. Their circumstances could have changed. So for the time being, they don't need what you're offering. There's all kinds of reasons. So, you've got to really have that growth mindset, and you've got to think there's real possibilities here, because there really are. We can touch on those in a few minutes.
That's a really good point. And I've just been finishing reading a fantastic book called Worthy by
Uh-huh.
Jamie Kern-Lima, who is very successful in the cosmetics industry. But one thing she talks about is sometimes you talked about the fear. Then we have a fear of not going back to our past customers because we're afraid of what they might say. And she actually puts that right back to sometimes we don't think we're worthy enough. We haven't got enough sort of self-worthiness to go back. But if
Hmm.
you've got worthiness in yourself and in your team, you actually look at it from that perspective of which you just said. It could be they wanted to move on. It could be they thought the grass was greener. They had an attractive price point. It could be that you've been a victim of exchange rates, or what Canada's facing. You do tariffs, right, from
Right.
the incoming new president, right? It might not be your fault, and so I think having them some self-worth around yourself and your team to go back and go, hey, you know what? Maybe things have changed. And as you said, I know you've got some examples where that's happened a number of times where people have gone to a competitor. But many times, not everybody in your client wanted to go to the competitor. It might have been a couple of buying influencers who made the
Yeah.
decision, but the other people have gone, "Hey, how come we moved away from Dan? We like Dan. What's going on? We're not going with Dan anymore. No, we made this change. Blah blah blah." And there's a whole bunch of people who actually just go, "Oh, okay then," or "I'm reporting to a leader, so I kind of have to go with it." But they weren't happy. They actually were really happy where they were. So I think that's a really interesting point, and that's that point also about saying, well, okay, they move. What can we learn from that experience? What didn't we do well? Did we get a bit fat, dumb, and happy? Did we get complacent in the account management, which I often see a little bit of laziness creep in? They just they call it run rate business, which I hate the word. That phrase, oh, it's just, we've got new business, we're chasing new logos, then we've got our run rate business. And they almost treat those great customers like second class citizens. Have you found that
It's
to be
it.
a case?
Oh, it's crazy. Here's your bread and butter, and you start taking them for granted.
Yes.
It's amazing. There was one company that Lonnie Siambi took over. They were faltering. They were a Nasdaq company. They got delisted, and Lonnie was brought in, and he had found that they had these five huge telco companies that were customers, and they each left. And he couldn't, like, how on earth could you let these companies go? And so he reached out and he talked to them, and they felt undervalued, they felt unappreciated, they felt like they really didn't matter, and they left one by one. Anyway, Lonnie went back, added tremendous new value, showed them exactly why he was committed to making them really, central to their importance. And he ended up winning all five of these huge telcos back. And then what he was able to do is he was able to go out to his salespeople were able to go out to all kinds of new accounts saying, listen, these five huge telcos use us. You should too.
Yes.
And then he also went back to other customers that they'd lost, and he said, these big players have given us a second chance, and they've loved us. So why don't you give us a second chance? So there's this tremendous cascading effect. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a big deal.
It
And it
is.
also really, go ahead,
Yeah,
sorry.
I was going to say it's a big deal. So might be a really nice time to talk about some metrics. So when you get a moment, just tell us about some of the metrics that you worked out and calculated about WinBack, because I've heard some of these, and I'd be interested to see what they were in the new book and what are some new metrics you've got.
Yeah, so what one of the things that I wanted to find out is like when I was originally doing this, like when did my first win back, it was like it blew the doors off my thinking around win back. We can, again, we can talk about that later, but I wanted to find out, is my experience unique? Because what I found was that win back was basically the fastest, easiest money I'd ever made, in 20 years of marketing. And we generated like 50,000 customers. We had all kinds of huge companies like, Wells Fargo and Amex, like, not 50,000 of those, but
Yeah, but
we
big
had
companies.
we
Yeah.
we had a fair amount of sales success. And and this win back was the numbers were nuts. It was better than anything we'd done anywhere else. Like we of course we'd made more money, but I'm talking about this much money in this short period of time at this cost. So I did the study, and what I found was that my experience was very common. The average win back for a small to medium sized business we found was $485,000. And of course, large organizations make millions. So it's very hard to put a number on large organizations because if you're Starbucks, you're making tens of millions, or if you're
Yes.
Netflix, you're making tens of millions. But that kind of gives you an idea. You're a company with less than 200 employees. Most of them that we surveyed were more like 10 to 15 employees, but 485K. Um, and so why is there so much revenue? Well, what my study found was that on average, 1 in 4 customers come back. That's like 26% of return. And there was a study in the featured in the Harvard Business Review, and they found that 31% returned. And that one involved, I think it was 40,000 customers, and about 13,000 of them came back. So customers will come back, and they'll come back in large numbers. And I know that some people like can enjoy tremendous returns much higher than that. Um, but that's what the study found. And so, if you're going to make a lot of money out of win back, and it's not just how many return, but it's how much they spend when they return. And when they come back, what we found was that lifetime value more than doubles. So if they spent $1,000 in their first lifetime value with you before they left, they'll chances are they'll spend more than $1,000 when they come back. And that study that was featured in the Harvard Business Review found the exact same thing. They found that after a customer came back, they spent about 110% of what they spent the first time around. Um, Win back costs very, very low. For an SMB, they averaged under $5,000. So that's a 97x ROI. And so,
That's
why are the
amazing,
costs
isn't
so?
it? I mean, I think that's
It's
one of the key points, isn't it? That WinBack is low cost in terms of a marketing strategy because so much of the work has been done before. They remember the good things. They know your brand. They're aware of you. You don't have to go through the kind of 7 to 9 touch points before someone will kind of get be interested in talking to you. Or in this market, they think it's way more than 7 to 9 anymore. It's about 1,700. Some people are telling me before people start to interact. So you already have that. You're a known quantity. So, I mean, taking Lonnie's example before, when he called, they knew who he was. They knew the
Mhm.
organisation. They knew their good points, and there were some bad points. That's why they left. But there was so much done. I think it's a really interesting point that low cost of marketing and the upside is just so compelling.
Yeah, it's tremendous. I mean, your leads are free. They're just sitting there in your CRM. You don't have to pay for ads. You don't have to, buy lists. You don't have to pay people to create relationships and build trust.
Yes.
It's amazing. So obviously the ROI is very high.
Yeah.
The study found that at the low end, the ROI is about 32, averages around 32x, and at the high end, it's around 182x.
So
And at the
32
low end,
times low end, and then was it 180 times on the high end?
182 at the high end.
182x on the high end. That's amazing.
Yeah. So I could give you a couple of examples to
Yeah.
nail that down a bit, or we could drive on.
Sure. No, yeah, give us some examples. That'd be great.
Okay. So the 32x, like a good example of that, was a company that had to that had a very high cost of acquiring a customer, even high cost of reacquiring a customer. So it was an HR agency, and they had to wine and dine entire HR teams to get the
Right.
business back. And so that campaign generated 1.5 million, but the cost was $50,000 to wine and dine all these HR teams. So that was a 30x ROI. And again, it was because the cost of reacquisition was high, but normally the cost of reacquisition isn't that high. That's why the average is 97x for SMBs.
Yeah.
Something that's much more typical is a much higher ROI. And if it's an enterprise deal, chances are it's you're getting on the phone and talking to someone. But to bring it down a little bit, there's a gentleman, his name is Ron Contorno, and he does win backs for Major League Ball clubs. I'm actually working with Ron right now. And he did a campaign where he did postcards. This was simply postcards, reaching out
Right.
to past customers, and he got, I think, with the Rangers, he got 170 something X, and with the Detroit Tigers, he got over 180 X. It's because the cost of reacquiring a customer was just so low. It was a postcard, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and if now Ron created a brilliant postcard, but the point is that his win-back strategy was getting like those big numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we just touch on one more thing is
Sure.
that sales happen so much faster, right? Because you've already been through everything once, right?
Right. Right. And you're probably
So,
on
we
panel and things like that too. So from a procurement point of view, they haven't taken you off the panel if there's that sort of stuff as well. You're still there. So the switch back on again is pretty simple.
100%, right? You're already an approved vendor. You've already been through all their security protocols. There's all these advantages at the enterprise level. And, they already know you, your brand. They've already used your product. They can give you a real comparison between you and the competition, you
Right.
know. So yeah. So sales, what we found for SMBs is sales happen 70% faster. If you do the inverse of that,
Mhm.
it means you can sell basically three past customers in the time it takes to sell one new one.
Yeah. It's incredible. So you and I talk about this, and we know how compelling it is. But if we go back a few steps, you said your sister Lisa played a key role in getting you to think about WinBack because you were,
Yeah.
like many salespeople and sales leaders, focused on new logos and focused on new customer acquisition. Tell me about how Lisa got you switched on to WinBack?
Well, um, Lisa's a very pragmatic person. I'm more of I want the win,
Right.
and I focus on the win. I want to win, and we had think well, this is what happened with me. Like it took us a long time to figure out who our ICP was. It took a
Right.
long time to find the value that really resonated with them, and then have the messaging so they would understand that we were delivering that value.
Yeah. So hang on a sec, just to take a sec, just for the people listening. So ICP, Dan talks about its ideal customer profile, right? So it's your ideal customer profile, and that's a level of maturity when you realize who actually do we service best, and we like working with. What's our ideal customer profile? So you see once you had that nailed, and then you knew the messaging that went with that particular customer.
Exactly. And and just a little more perspective, like this company, like in we got killed in the dot-com crash, and we had to refigure out who our ICP was and
Right.
refigure messaging and then we got killed again in 2008 with the financial crisis.
Yeah.
So, it was a big deal for us to go and figure this stuff all out again, for new economic times. So anyway, um, uh, I'd invested a lot in ICP. We finally get something that's winning, and we're really excited. We're growing thousands and thousands of new customers. Um, and then in 2016, churn really started to spike. And Lisa had always bugged me. She always said, we lose, a lot of customers every year. Why don't we try to win some of them back? And so I just did ad hoc outreach, and they didn't do anything. And but in 2016, when we had this big spike in churn, she basically held my feet to the fire. She said, "Dan, you're responsible for this. fix it.
You're responsible.
Uh,
Fix it. Great family love, Dan. I can feel it.
yeah, yeah. I tell you, I got more love for my other partners,
That's right.
but she wasn't that blunt, but she made a really good point. She
Yeah.
said that um, we've got to at least test this and test it really seriously. Like, they did business with us before. You know, relationships are sticky. They chose us for a reason. So why don't we go all out and really do a real test to see if people will come back or not? So what happened was I took everything I knew from like 20 years of marketing. I just threw it into the mixer and um, um, I made a really good effort.
Yeah.
And so what we did is I just said to Lisa, I remember the day before we launched, I said, listen, I don't think this is a good pool of prospects. We've already been out to a bunch of them once and they didn't come back. I really don't think there's much that's going to come out of this. And anyway, but we launched and we got like a 57x ROI right out of the gate.
Wow.
But what's really interesting, Rob, is that I don't think I did WinBack because I wasn't confident that people would come back. Like I didn't want to hear crap from people. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I wanted to have people new and happy. And what I got is a lot more confidence because I found, geez, a lot of people did like our product, did like
Right.
what we offer.
Right.
They felt that they did get value. And so so that made me feel like we're doing a good job because I think one of the underlying currents I had was like I'm not doing a good job like for everybody,
Yeah.
and I want to do a good job for everybody.
Well, that's our
So anyway,
mindset, Dan, too. I think you've tapped into a really good point there. Our mindset is always going to be negative. Our bias is towards negativity and negative self-talk, which is we lost that customer. I must have done a bad job. We must have done a bad job. That product sucked. And you amplify a lot of negatives that really aren't negatives or really don't need the amplification. And you do it to yourself. And it reminded me of someone I was chatting to the other day, a very successful athlete. And I said, what was a big shift when you really, really went to the elite level? And I was fascinated what they said. And I think this is very relevant to your point. They said, the shift came when I stopped listening to myself and started talking to myself,
ah,
right? Stopped listening to the negative self-talk and started using positive affirmations and talk about the stuff that's going right because our mind wants to protect us. So it's a safety bias we have in our brains that goes to all the bad stuff. It's just got this, it protects us on some days and other days it's just not really helpful. And so, I'm guessing what you found is when you call back and you didn't have the confidence, didn't think it was going to work, didn't want to hear a sob story, didn't want to hear a negativity because no one wants to hear that, as humans.
mhm.
But you found these people going, actually, we got really good value from you, and we found this product is still working. In fact, we're still using it, or that kind of thing. And you go, hang on a second here. What I was telling myself and what we were telling ourselves as an organization wasn't actually true.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think we're our own worst enemies in some ways. We're our own
Yep.
harshest critics.
Yes.
We know every little flaw, every little piece of our program that might not be 100%.
Yes.
It might be 80%. And then for most of us, that's just not good enough. Like we've got this perfection bias.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things I love so much about your work, Rob, is that you show people what's possible and you come from a place where you can back it up what you've done. I mean, look at
Yeah.
what did you have like I can't remember the exact story, but when you went into Australia for was it Miller Hyman and you
Yeah.
just busted all sales records, people had this 4 minute mile in their mind.
Mm,
I don't know what it was, $1 million
right.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
and you just like and what did you do? You just multiplied that.
Yeah.
I
We
mean,
did
you just blew
5x
the
in one
doors up.
year. Yeah.
Exactly. I was
Yeah.
afraid to say that because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because and it was all and I think it was your mindset. Obviously, you're brilliant at sales, but there's other brilliant people at sales at Miller Hyman too, you
Yeah.
know. And you were and I think that you know because of that story, it lends so much heft
Yeah.
to your ideas. Like this is real stuff. This isn't like some woo-woo stuff. This is real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the
So
secret to that though is hanging out with the people who also understand that. And that was the catalyst for me, was actually hanging out with the ones who were doing 5x, 10x.
right.
And so I had to be intentional about that. So that meant me getting off my ass in Australia and getting to America and sitting down and getting, audiences with, with great people you would know, like Tom Williams, and listening to Tom, who I still count as a mentor, and listening to how he did it. And I'm like, wow, that's different. I'm going to take that learning back. And that's really what was the catalyst for doing that. So I think sometimes you got to hang with the right people who, I think it's like cycling. They say if you're the fastest guy in your group, get a new group, right? So it's essentially how I kind of live my philosophy anyway. That's why I went and found a group that was doing that, because they just think differently.
Yeah, yeah. I remember talking to Jill Conrath once,
Oh
and
yeah,
I don't know if you know her, but
yes,
she's like been, yeah. And she just holds everything to a higher standard, and it's just like, just talking to her the first time, it's like, wow, you know, I'm going to have to hold myself to a higher standard,
that's it. It
Yeah,
pushes you. It's
it
it's
does.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
That's what we
we're
call
capable about so much more than,
eustress. It's a positive stress, but it's a positive
that's right.
to kind of
That's right.
lift you higher. Hey, you talk about a couple of things on the WinBack. You've got in the book. You talk about 7 steps to a WinBack strategy. Can you run us through what the 7 are? Don't go into detail on it, but just give us the 7.
Sure. So, yeah. So the first thing is you want to identify your best win back prospects. You talked earlier about getting the people back that you actually want,
Yes.
right? So, so you want so this step, what we do is we figure out who's going to generate the most revenue and who has the highest probability of returning. So that's what we
Yeah.
do in step one. And we talked about before about how lifetime value doubles or more. So
Yep.
there's kind of like one idea, right?
Yep.
If you want to go and do this yourself. Um, Step two, it's understanding your best prospects. You want to find out why they left and what's needed to win them back. And so you need to. We have a 3-step process. First, we talk to people within the company, uh, to the people who've actually had those accounts, the customer success people, the salespeople who created the accounts, customer success people who are supporting the accounts. So we do the internal work first, and then we do external work, where we do surveys, qualitative surveys, because we want to find out what the big rocks are. We don't want to
Right.
guess. We want to ask, what are the big rocks? Why did you leave? What it'll take for you to win people back?
Yep.
And after we start hearing the same thing over and over again, we know that piece of the work is
Right.
done. So now we know what the big rocks are. Now we want to know what the relative importance of each of those rocks are. So that's when we survey everyone and we ask them which of these 3 things is most important. Um, so we get this really solid understanding. So we might find, so then the step 3 is getting win back ready. And so there might be reasons why people left. Maybe there's new value you need to create. Maybe your market has shifted and you didn't realize that you were losing customers to a competitor who had something that you need. Maybe your customer service isn't as good as it needs to be. Maybe you need to up your game there. Um, Maybe there's nothing you need to change. But
Right.
step 3 is fixing anything that needs to be fixed.
So
Step
that can
4,
also
that's
help new product development roadmaps, can't it, as well? So when you're thinking about which way we go in terms of product development and product marketing, and product managers is sometimes like that, and leaders are like, where do we invest? For the future with new product, because it's expensive, and you have a roadmap. So this can definitely influence that, I'd imagine.
it's huge. It's huge. We learned so much about where the market was heading. There were, and you can even take a look at it. You can even get a little more granular. There's people who changed because of this, and they can be like a canary in the mine shaft.
Right.
When you do this on a continuing basis, you see, oh, we lost 5 customers this month to this particular competitor. Well, we asked them, why did you go to that particular competitor? What was attractive to them versus all the other competitors? So you start to see value that is starting to emerge, the need is starting to emerge in the market. And then there's going to be other things where all kinds of people left, so these are the things you got to take care of right away. But yes, it's a tremendous for new product development and for new functionality for current product.
Yeah.
So the next step 4, is creating the WinBack revenue engine. And basically that means creating the messaging and the offer, right? So now
Right.
because of your previous work, the number 1, 2, and 3 reasons why they left, that 1, 2, and 3 reasons why what would take to win them back. So now you create an offer based on that. You create messaging based on that. And that's what we do in step 4 of
Right.
the revenue engine. Next step is step 5, getting launch ready. Basically, you want to make sure that everybody knows what their job is and creating like a really strong onboarding process to make sure that, you've done all this work to win them back.
Yeah.
Make darn sure that customer service, customer success, I've got a process to give them this tremendous first impression that they made the right decision to come back. Believe it or not, that's where a lot of people falter, unfortunately, and it's very easy.
Dan, can I just give you a great story here? So I had a
Yeah, yeah.
senior leader tell me about this, and I was talking to him about problems in his business, and he said, "We do this great win back. At the moment, we're doing this great win back. The messaging's right, the ICP's right." He said, "We pull up at the door of their building and we put them into a beautiful Bentley GTC, and then we take them across to onboarding and we put them on a moped." And he said, and it all falls over. So your point, I think it might be step 5, is a really critical one. And I want to tell you, this was literally 2 weeks ago. This leader told me this story. He said, "We've got,
Oh, wow.
what are we going to do? Like we just didn't onboard right. Like the experience was so good until we brought them back again, and we're dropping the ball here. What can we do?" No, so I just want to share that one because his analogy of the Bentley GTC, picking them up and it's fantastic. We're having champagne and we drop them off and give them a moped and a crash helmet.
That's nuts. That is nuts. So now you launch the campaign,
Yeah.
and what we like to do is do a test campaign with maybe 25% of the people that you identify that you
Okay.
want to win back.
Yeah.
So we launch the campaign, and then after the campaign, we do step 7, which is basically we want to make your business stronger and more profitable and be ready for the next launch. So I'll just try to make this
Mm.
fast. So after you do the test campaign, you do a win-loss analysis,
Yeah.
and you want to find out why they bought. You want to find out why the people who bought. You want to find out why they bought, and the people who didn't buy. You want to find out why they didn't buy. They told you something in the surveys, and you got knowledge out of the surveys, but what people tell you and how they act are not always the exact same thing, right?
Great
So
point.
you
Yeah.
want to you want to find out the real reasons why, and they might be very close. So they probably are. So then what you do is you take what you learn from that win loss, you adjust your program, you adjust your messaging, adjust your offer if needed, and then you do the rollout. So, um, you know, you've got tremendous stories about that. If you want to share a win loss story, Rob, or we can drive on.
Yeah, no, it's one thing I'm really thinking about here. I would think our audience are also thinking about this. Couple of points. One is on this to do a successful win back needs to have sales, marketing, customer service really aligned.
Mhm.
And that's not a given in some organizations. Some organizations who are running silo or have KPIs that are not aligned or have OKRs that are not aligned. I've seen that and you've probably seen that. So I think one of the key elements of getting the win back right is actually having the sales, marketing, customer success or customer service really aligned it in the strategy. Would that be correct?
100%. Like I like to have everybody right from day one. Like so when we do the selection of customers, when we do the surveying, everybody is involved from day one because sales knows things about customers that marketing doesn't know. Marketing knows things that customer success doesn't know. Customer service knows things that customer success doesn't know. And they all have their ideas on how things should be approached. And we've got to put this all into the hopper, and everything has to be considered. And because we want everybody rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
We want everybody's voices to be heard, and then we want to test whatever makes the most sense. And then if that doesn't work, then we try whatever the secondary thing is. But
So who do you need, Dan? Tell me about who do you need to coordinate this? I'm thinking about a real growth mindset, sort of catalyst leader who can lead. Is there a point person you found to be most successful in leading a good win back? Is it someone who's over the top of sales and marketing, customer service? Is it one particular leader who takes the lead? Where have you seen that work best?
I think that what I've seen is that it's somebody who's, first of all, they've got to be sold on the idea.
Right.
you know And if they're sold, because you really need a cheerleader. This is something that can get put on the back burner so easily because there's always, something more important to do. So it's got to be somebody uh, who's really excited about the possibility, and it also has to be somebody who's fairly high up. Um, and like what I find is customer success people are some of the best people to head this up, and even CROs. What
Yeah.
if I would be really interested in hearing because you do so much work with enterprise, who do you find is the best?
Well, I find it can be a variety of leaders, but I think you said it earlier that they've got to have credibility with the
Yeah.
leaders above them. Credibility with their own peers is the key because they've got to coordinate a number of peers to make this happen. So sometimes it doesn't matter if it's the head of customer service, customer success, or a sales leader, or even a marketing leader. If they're the cheerleader, the evangelist, the key is that they've got credibility, and that they can sell it internally so it doesn't get railroaded or it doesn't get put on the back burner. That's where I've found the most success. So it doesn't matter which one it is. They've got to understand it. They've got to be bought. They've got to be sold on it. But they can evangelize and sell it to the rest of their organization. That's what I found to be the most successful.
Yeah, yeah. And they've got to have enough clout to get people to do the work that they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So it's got to be somebody high enough up. Um, and also, one of the great things about WinBack is that you can really do small tests. And because as soon as people see the numbers for their own
Right.
organization, that's what's going to cause the real buy-in. Because as
Yeah.
soon as your CRM or sorry, your CRO or CMO or CEO sees these numbers, or the board, they're gonna be all in. Everybody wants to
Yeah.
make super high profitable revenue, of course,
Yes.
but until you see numbers for your own business, it's vapor for a
Well,
lot
I
of
think
people,
the other thing is that where I've also seen it successful, or at least start to get momentum to your point, is I've seen key account managers lead this. So I've seen key account managers who are running some large key accounts that make a big difference because that's the money side. I've seen
Mhm.
them start it and go and but work with their sales leader and ask for permission from their sales leader, saying, "Hey, I want to win this one back. This was a great company. I'm going to need your support, Mr. Sales Manager, to help me with your peers." Because I'm going to need a bit of marketing time, a bit of customer success time. I want to do some outreach, but I want to go for this. And so I've seen some pilots work, even in very big organizations. And then the numbers come back in, and then everyone's going, hang on a second. Hey, well, I thought we lost them, that we're winning them back. And
Yeah,
where I think there's one
yeah,
story I gave you where one organization like that just, you talked about when the company came back, they tripled the revenue. And that gave the momentum to the leader to go, you know what, we invested a little bit over here. How can we scale this now? And now they have a full win back strategy, or it's a win back as a pillar of their marketing, which is the end goal.
yeah. And when you win back these customers, there's so many ways we go with this, Rob. I want to make sure there's one thing we really hit with this.
Yeah.
When you reach out to people, and they were unhappy, because we haven't been talking really about unhappy customers
Yes.
yet. But if they are unhappy with you, you get a chance to fix a problem, because now especially in B2B, so much of it is peer recommendations or yeah, G2 or something like that. So
Right.
if you've got these people who've got unresolved issues with you, that you've got all these down. Not only are they not saying great things about you, they're it's causing problems. But when you reach out to people and you say, listen, something happened here, things went sideways, we'd like to really understand. And if we can fix things, fine. But at minimum, we would like to learn, how we can do better in the future. And so many people will react to that. They'll take that call. And
Dan,
and
who's the best
so
person to make that call from the organization that lost the business? Who do you find is best? Is it a third party? Is it someone different than the account team to make that call, in your experience?
I hate to give it depends, but this is important.
Yeah,
It's
it,
first
it
of all,
probably
it's got to
does.
be it's got to be somebody who's really good with people, right? Because they've got to be empathetic. It can't be anybody who's defensive.
Right.
It's got to be somebody who's like, you know what? I'm going to take responsibility, even if I'm not fully responsible. It's got to
Yeah.
be that kind of a mindset
Right.
person. It's also better if it's somebody who didn't have direct contact with the customer. So if it's maybe a customer success manager or a sales manager, and if they've got some position within the company, it shows that customer that these people are taking this seriously, right? So
Yeah.
that's also a factor.
Right.
Yeah, so somebody higher up, somebody who hasn't had direct customer contact, because that customer will be much more likely to tell you the truth, because they
Right.
don't, nobody wants to hurt anybody else's feelings,
Of
eh? And
course.
nobody
Yeah.
wants
No
to
one
be
likes confrontation as well. Of
yeah.
course. Yeah.
So that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
So somebody's one step about now, and I would prefer to be somebody within the organization, but there's also some great third parties you can find that will do this kind of surveying for you.
Right. Right. Okay. So we're up to step 6, I think. Am I right?
Yeah. So step 6 is launching the campaign, which is
Yep.
basically the test, right? So we do the test. So step 7 is you want to get everything you can out of this test, right?
Yep.
So you've done the test. So now you've done the learnings, and step 7 is like a big coagulation of
Right.
everything now, right? So you now you know everything that uh, why people came back, why they didn't come back, so you can change your messaging or modify it for the rollout, right? So then you do your rollout.
Yeah.
Um, you you've talked to all these people about why they've left, and you find, well, you know what? They left because of, say it was because of customer service.
Right.
Say that 30% left because of customer service. So before you do the win back, you want to plug any of those holes in customer service, right? And you might also find that maybe some people left because there's this one particular value that you aren't offering that your competitors are offering. And maybe a few percent of people left because of that. So what you do is you offer those things to your current customers. So maybe you gave them an extra level of customer service. Maybe you gave them premium service, for
Right.
example, right? To get people back. Offer that to all your current customers,
Right.
you know,
Gotcha.
or maybe,
Gotcha.
yeah. And what you do is you'll find that kind of thing increases retention. But the biggest thing that'll increase retention is you're going to find the biggest hole in your leaky sales bucket.
Yeah.
And and that can be massive. I mean, Tom Williams, he did this, and he found and he was able to raise his retention rate from 83% to 97%,
Yeah.
because
Because he
he
plugged the
found that
leak.
he found
Yeah.
what the leak was, and he plugged it.
Right.
Now, Tom's brilliant. He did a lot of digging, and he did a lot of research, and he worked with the EVP of sales. But the point is that unless they did this work, they would have never found why they were losing these 14% of people.
Right. Right.
And he did the work, and he found that what it was a sales problem. They were
Yeah.
selling into middle management. They should have been selling into the C-suite. So
Right.
they went back and they did their selling into the C-suite. Um, they won back 90% of their lost
Right.
customers, 90%, and they reduced churn from 83%. I mean, they increased retention from 83% to 97%.
Yeah.
So what you learn is from WinBack is tremendously important for increasing retention. And a lot of people find that's the biggest benefit of WinBack is the retention. Another big thing is you're going to improve your brand reputation, right? So you've reached out to all these people, showed that you care, asked them to chat,
Yeah.
um, and so what happens is there's two things kick in. Uh, um, there's something called the peak end rule, and the peak end rule basically says is that your feelings about something or someone or an experience is based on the peak of that experience and the end. Well, at the end of the experience with your lost customers, for some of them, they were so unhappy that they left,
Right.
right? So that was the end experience. So when you reach out and you offer and you want to hear them out, something now this last experience that has a disproportionately large effect on how they feel about you is much more positive because you're asking them. People want to feel validated. They want to feel cared for and heard. And this is what you do.
Hmm. Mm.
Um, and then when you offer to actually do something about it, something is kicked in called the pratfall effect. And basically, the pratfall effect says that if you have a problem with somebody and you fix that problem, they not only like you more, but you're also seen as more competent. And so when you combine the peak end rule, I'm really short, making this
Yeah.
short, but when you combine the peak end
No, I
rule
like it.
and and the pratfall effect, you can literally turn unhappy customers into advocates.
Yeah.
And I've got a story about that in the book where the CEO of Refine Labs um, um, did that.
Yeah. You
So
know,
she's, she's
it also taps into the scarf model about how the brain works, and this because the first part of scarf is status. You actually elevated someone's status. You actually called them back and you said, "Hey, I want to hear from you." And not only do I want to hear from you, I've listened to you, and that's really important. What you just raised, I'm going to go fix that now, right? So you've just elevated someone's status.
yeah,
You've also given them a bit of autonomy as well, but and you probably a little bit of R of relatedness, right? So I
yeah,
think there's that
100%.
part of the brain gets also switched on. Hey, look, just in the interest of time, I had another question for you. We've talked a lot about talking about winning back customers that have left. What is your thinking about doing not so much a win back call, but actually we talked about win loss analysis, but actually calling customers when you win and finding out why you won. Do you think that's
Well, that
worthwhile?
that's brilliant. That is just brilliant. I mean, I remember you told a story about someone who had won an account and they didn't get it the second time around because they
Yeah,
didn't understand why they won.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I found great value in actually reaching out while you won, just to find out, just find, well, what were the top three reasons, and finding out why you actually appointed us. And I find there's gold in that as well. And I just not sure if you ever covered that or you had any thoughts on win analysis as well as the other.
no, I think win analysis is tremendously important. I think that um, it's so important. We think we win because we got more value than the competition because our salespeople put on did the best presentation.
Such
We
charisma,
Yeah, I
relationships.
mean, we're so wonderful,
Yeah, that's right.
but the fact of the matter is you really don't know why you won. And you know I think it's I know for myself. I remember we won this huge deal with a big mutual fund company, and I did not want to go back and ask them why we won because I was afraid they would have second thoughts about us, And that I mean this is
Yes,
what things are
it's
like
human
when you're
nature, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah. It's just like, oh my God, I mean, it took so long to get this deal,
right.
and they had vetted us and everybody else anyway, but I was still afraid, and yeah. Anyway, so there I probably laid out a little bit. I probably laid out a little too much there, Rob.
Well, no, you're very honest, and Dan, and I think it's for a lot of people is that people go, we've won, let's just move on with it. So I think there's a lot of that. We make assumptions while we won, and we
Yeah.
believe those opinions to be facts, and that's where you can fall over, and especially if you've been a successful personal sales team for a while, you can kind of start believing your own hype. And I
Yeah.
think that's dangerous. And I think just as you have that kind of independent or different person in your org find out why you lost and you're doing a win back, it's really have that independent go in and find out actually why we won. And because nothing bad can come of that. So I'm definitely a firm believer in it. Hey, we're just about out of time, but I wanted to find out so it's WinBack Labs, it's Dan. So where do we find out more about you and WinBack Labs, and where can we find out more about the book?
So if you go to winbacklabs.com, there's a link to the book there. Talks all
Brilliant.
about the book and why everybody should get it.
For sure.
Um,
I highly
but it's
recommend it.
um, it's right now up until the end of up until January, it's in with the Kindle promotion. So for
Oh,
$10, you
great.
get all the Kindle books, all those
Great.
Kindle free books. So it's in there until then,
Yeah.
and after that, it'll be 1995.
Fantastic. And Dan, you're on LinkedIn. Anywhere
Yep.
else we can find you? Obviously, your website and LinkedIn's probably the big one for you.
Yeah, the website and LinkedIn are the two main places that I hang out.
Yeah, beautiful. Hey, Dan, great to catch up again. So much information in this for both large enterprises and small businesses and mid-sized organizations. So the book is $1 Million WinBack. Go get it. I love it. If you've enjoyed this podcast, give us a like and give us a few comments, but also go buy the book. Thanks, Dan, for your time.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be here.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the It's All Possible podcast. You can contact me at rob@robhartnett.com or my website, robhartnett.com, or on LinkedIn. Remember to check out the previous seasons and episodes of the podcast and the show notes for more details on this episode's guest. For more inspiration, remember to check out the It's All Possibility playlist on Spotify, which contains a collection of upbeat, positive music I use for inspiration in my live performances. Until next time, live with passion and a perspective of possibility.